My name is Wazanai, and welcome to the very first episode of the Ember podcast. Honestly, I am so excited and a little bit nervous too because starting something new always comes, with a mix of emotions, but I'm really, really grateful that you are here listening. For the longest time, I have kept asking myself, what should the first episode even be about? I had so many ideas. At one point, I really wanted to talk about women's issues. Hello, I'm a woman. Relationships, expectations, all those things that we constantly deal with on a daily basis. But the more that I thought about it, the more that I felt like I didn't just want to speak about trends or from what everybody else is talking about online. I wanted to create the space to feel honest, to make it personal, to make it real. And I realized that if I'm going to have these conversations, I want them to come from a genuine place, from my own experiences, my own struggles, the lessons that God has been teaching me, and the things that I'm still figuring out myself. So I took time to pray about it. And as I was praying and reflecting, I really felt like God was leading me towards this topic called perfectionism. And wow, this is something I think so many of us silently struggle with. The pressure to always get it right, to always look put together, to never fail, to never disappoint people, to constantly feel like you have to prove yourself. Sometimes perfectionism looks productive on the outside, but inside it can actually leave you feeling exhausted, you feel anxious, you're stuck, and even afraid to start things because you're scared they won't come out perfectly. And honestly, I've been there. So today we're going to have a real conversation about perfectionism, where it comes from, how it affects us spiritually, emotionally, and mentally, and how God never actually called us to be perfect. He called us to be faithful. So let's get right into it. So I've always believed in perfectionism, and for the longest time, I genuinely thought perfection was the goal. If it wasn't perfect, then it wasn't good enough. If it wasn't flawless, polished, well-planned, beautifully executed, then maybe it wasn't ready to be seen. And that a lot of people actually live like this. We edit ourselves before we even begin. We delay things. We overthink. We replay ideas in our minds 1,000 times. We keep preparing, but never actually starting. But this is something that I've learned. Perfectionism looks like high standards on the outside, but many times it's just fear that is wearing nice clothes. Fear of failing, fear of embarrassing yourself, fear of being judged, fear of disappointing people, fear of not measuring up. And sometimes perfectionism comes from how we were raised. Maybe you only got praised when you performed well. Maybe mistakes were punished harshly. Maybe you learned to tie your worth to achievement. Sometimes it comes from comparison. These days with social media, it has made everybody's life look polished and complete. You see people posting finished products, successful businesses, beautiful marriages, thriving ministries, and you forget that behind every perfect thing, there were many years, so many years of messy beginnings that nobody saw. So sometimes perfectionism comes from rejection. You become so afraid of criticism that you would rather not try at all than try and fail publicly. And honestly, perfectionism can become exhausting because you are constantly carrying the pressure of needing to get everything right. But the truth is, you do not grow by perfecting things in your head. You grow by doing, by trying, by failing, by adjusting, by learning, and then maybe failing again and then trying again. Progress is actually messy. Growth is messy. Improvement is messy, but mercy is where every skill is born. Mercy is where confidence is built. It's where businesses start. Mercy is where ministries begin. Mercy is where your purpose is discovered. Nobody starts as an expert. And one thing I've realized is that waiting for the perfect moment actually kills the momentum. Imperfect action actually builds it. Sometimes we don't start what God has placed in our hearts because we are waiting for perfect conditions. We tell ourselves, I'll start when I have the money. I'll start when I'm more qualified, when I'm more confident. I'll start when everything finally makes sense. But if you read the Bible in the book of Ecclesiastes 11, verse 4, it says, whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. And that scripture, it really challenged me because it talks about someone who's waiting for the perfect weather before planting seeds, waiting for the clouds to clear, waiting for certainty, and waiting for the ideal conditions. And if we are being very honest with ourselves, many of us actually live exactly like that. We analyze everything, maybe overanalyze everything. We over-prepare, we overthink, we wait, and we wait, and we wait. And before you know it, many years have already passed. This is what people call the paralysis of analysis. When you think so much about something that you never actually move. The verse teaches us something which is really powerful here. If you demand perfect conditions before you obey God or pursue your purpose, you may never move at all. Life will never give you complete certainty. Faith actually requires movement before clarity. And this podcast is honestly a testimony of that. At one point, I had this beautiful vision in my mind of how I actually wanted to start this podcast. I imagined myself in a very gorgeous studio setup, beautiful furniture, cinematic cameras, expensive microphones, the perfect lighting, everything looking polished and, just world-class standard. And there's actually nothing wrong with wanting excellence, but I realized that I was slowly turning the desire for excellence into an excuse to delay obedience. God was saying, start. He kept on saying, do this thing. And I kept saying, but Lord, I still need this. I still need that. I need, this beautiful studio. Until I realized something, that what matters most is not having everything, but what matters most is taking the first step in faith, because growth comes after movement. God gives us the grace while we are already moving, not while we are endlessly hesitating. So we start where we are with what we have, and we trust God for the growth. And maybe someone listening today needs to hear this. What have you been perfecting in your mind for years? That business, that degree? Is it an application? Is it your ministry, that foundation? Is it an orphanage, a book, or that YouTube channel? That idea that God has placed in your heart. So there has never been a perfect time. There will never be the perfect moment. Start scared. Start small. Start messy. Start, whatever condition you are in, but just start, because the Lord is your light and is your salvation, and you have nothing to fear. And while we are talking about growth, I also want to talk about the differences, between being good and becoming great. So I once read this book that's called Good to Great. I think it's actually a very lovely book. And there's one statement that really stayed with me for a very long time that says good is the enemy of great. That statement is so powerful because many people stop growing once something becomes, good enough. When we become comfortable, we begin to settle. We stop learning, we stop stretching ourselves, we stop improving. And sometimes good can quietly become a trap. You get the job, you stopped developing yourself. Your business is surviving, so you stopped innovating. Your relationship is okay, so you stopped growing emotionally. Your spiritual life is decent, so you stopped seeking deeper intimacy with God. I think greatness requires discomfort to a certain extent. It requires the humility to admit there is still more in me. I can still improve. I can still grow. And one of the biggest signs of growth is curiosity. Curiosity is powerful because it keeps you moving. It keeps you learning. It keeps you open to what God may want to show you next. And honestly, curiosity is a sign of faith. Think about Abraham. When God called Abraham, he did not give him the full blueprint. He simply said, go to the land I will show you. Imagine that. No full map, no detailed explanation, no guarantee of comfort, but just God asking him to move. And Abraham, he moved anyway. Why? Because faith is willing to move before anything is fully revealed. Curious people explore. People who are curious, they ask questions, they try new things. Curious people dare to believe that there is more behind what they currently know. Some people stay in the same place their entire lives because they stopped being curious. They stopped learning. They stopped venturing. But growth belongs to people who are willing to move, to dare to do more, dare to try again, dare to explore what God may be calling you into. And that brings me to another important thing, which is to elevate yourself. Read books, learn new skills, go back to school if you need to. Take that course, learn that new trade, watch educational content, improve your communication, improve your mindset. Do not just stay stagnant. And please hear me when I say this. There is no age limit on growth. You are never too old to learn, never too old to start again, never too old to reinvent yourself, never too old to become better. Some people think growth is only for the young people, but as long as you are alive, God is not done with you yet. So you keep sharpening yourself because opportunities can locate you suddenly, and when they do, preparation really matters. And most importantly, growth is not just about money or success. It is also spiritual, it's emotional, and it's mental. So become kinder, become wiser, become more disciplined, more emotionally healthy, become more spiritually grounded, become the kind of person who can sustain the blessing you're praying for. And as I close today, I just want to encourage you. Stop waiting for the perfect conditions to become the person that God called you to be. Perfectionism is a myth. Growth is a journey, and faith requires movement. You do not need to have everything figured out before you begin. Take the first step. Trust God in the process and allow yourself to grow along the way. And thank you so much for joining me on this very, very first episode of the Ember podcast. And I genuinely pray that this conversation encouraged someone today. And remember, you do not have to be perfect to begin. You just have to be willing to start. Let's meet again next week, same time, same place, for the next episode of the Ember podcast. Bye.